the end of the day, in hindsight, Paul Castellano actually was the right choice. And when we look at guys like Gotti and essentially what happened to the mafia, at least the way that we know it, and what led to their demise, it completely makes sense. When you look at a guy like Carlo Gambino, who is considered widely as the best mafia boss in history, that is in part due to his foresight, especially being in that life. You gotta have it. He would go on to pass away in 1976, but this is where that foresight comes into key. On his deathbed, he makes a choice by making Paul the boss of his family. This was a massive shock in the underground world because everybody thought that it was going to be his underboss, Neil Delacroce. And it completely makes sense why Neil would have been the guy. He actually probably would have been a good boss. He was on the streets for decades and was high ranking and well respected within and outside the family. He was a fantastic earner, and more importantly, he sticked to the rules. On the other hand, Paul was made and was a capo for years. But more importantly, he was a really good businessman. So at this point, it just begs the question, why did Carlo choose Paul instead of Neil? Simply foresight. He knew that he needed a businessman to lead the family into the next generation. Carlo knew that the mafia could no longer be what it was in his prime. The idea of gambling dens and running numbers and extortion of small businesses and the such can only take you so far. If his family were to get more powerful, they had to get more immersed into white-collar crimes primarily. Because if you can get your guys as board members, or if you can get them as politicians, not just friends with politicians, if you can get them as CEOs or CFOs, if you can get them into that actual fiscal fabric itself, then you are protected. You are good to go. The politicians, the government, they're not going to go after you because in some ways you are part of that system. There's also just the fact that white-collar crimes have less risk and higher rewards. The reason why Madoff gets away with so much for so long is just basically because he was trusted. A lot of people may not know this, but he was actually legitimately very successful before his scheme. And even when it did start, other analysts knew that it was a Ponzi scheme, but they couldn't do anything about it because he was just too respected. He was just too ingrained into that fiber. The only reason why he gets caught is because the economy takes a massive downturn. Paul, for Carlo, I think was going to be the guy that was going to lead his family into that realm. But the reason why it doesn't work is because of who Paul is and his ego. He just didn't care to be respected by his men. He just wanted absolute loyalty, and that just led to his assassination. And with that, the rise of Gotti. But again, we're just back to having another street guy being the boss. And Gotti was not a good boss, at least not to the levels that people think that he is. Just because he's famous doesn't mean that he's good. And matter of fact, being famous as a mafia boss is not a good thing. He didn't really do anything to expand or grow his organization. He just kept the status quo. And in short, it just led to the mafia's downfall because he just didn't have foresight.